In the summer of 2016, in the city of Bellaire, Texas, a stone's throw from Houston, Dawn and Antonio Armstrong were both attacked by an unknown assailant, both of them shot while sleeping in the dead of the night. The couple's son heard the gunfire from elsewhere in the house and made an emergency call, sending responders rushing out to the house. These officers arrived to find that the home security system had not been breached. No one had entered or left the house for hours. The killer must have already been inside. Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and this is Just Thought Lounge. JTL is the true crime channel that delivers serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. This case is truly confounding. An unlikely suspect, a weak motive, both an abundance and notable lack of different physical evidence, and circumstances that seem to prove that sometimes things are not how they may appear. This is the strange case of Antonio Armstrong Jr. Let's take a look. Antonio and Dawn Armstrong have been described as a couple at the head of what was considered to be an all-American family. In 2016, both were 42 years old. Antonio was a Texan native. He had grown up in Houston. Antonio had studied at Texas A&M under a full scholarship to play football, before going on to the NFL, where he was a linebacker for the Miami Dolphins in the mid-1990s. Ankle injuries ended his career before he could get much playing time, but he moved on to play professionally in the CFL, the Canadian Football League, for 6 years. He and his wife Dawn co-owned and ran First Class Training, a gym in Bellaire. Antonio doubled as a personal trainer, motivational speaker, and a general health and fitness advocate.
I want you to pick back up those visions and those dreams that you once had.
By all accounts, it was a very happy marriage. The couple were parents to 3 children. Josh was the eldest. He was Dawn's son from a previous relationship. By 2016, Josh was a college student. He had also developed a close relationship with his stepfather and was extremely close to his younger siblings, 16-year-old Antonio Jr., known as AJ, and 12-year-old Kara. AJ was a football player himself and was known as the big man on campus. He and his sister still lived in the family home with their parents. On the evening of the 28th of July, 2016, the Armstrongs retired to bed around 10 p.m. Kara set the home security system that night, securing the family safely inside. They separated to their respective rooms. The master bedroom was located on the 2nd floor, where Dawn and Antonio slept. Kara was just down the hallway. AJ had a room in the loft on the 3rd floor, one that he had previously shared with his older brother Josh. 3 weeks earlier, however, Josh had moved into his own apartment only a short drive away. For hours that night, the house was quiet. The only activity was 16-year-old AJ awake in his room texting with his girlfriend Kate. The two called it a night at just past 1 a.m. The events of the next hour would change all of their lives forever. At 1:40 a.m., AJ called 911 emergency. He told the dispatcher that he heard gunshots in the house. He then descended to the 2nd floor and noticed that the door to his parents' bedroom was ajar. They never leave it open, even a crack, AJ said. He did not enter the room. Do you require medical assistance? Yes, AJ said. There were several lengthy pauses throughout the call while the dispatcher checked in with updates and information about the responding officers. Much of the call is inaudible. However, AJ was understood to have pondered aloud how someone could have gotten into the house.
Does it sound like a handgun, rifle, or shotgun?
I'm not out there. I know my dad has
In another barely distinguishable whisper, in response to the dispatcher, AJ notes a ringing that he has in his ear. Then, 7 minutes into the call, he also made another ambiguous statement.
Okay, can you hear anything else that's going on?
Towards the end of the 911 call, AJ entered a code into the ADT keypad on the front door to disable the home security system. The call lasted 16 minutes in total. Then, AJ is heard opening the door. He and Kara walked out to meet law enforcement. Responding officers entered the house and performed a walkthrough to confirm that no individuals were inside aside from Dawn and Antonio. This was verified within minutes. Emergency medical teams found Antonio Sr. in bed, clinging to life with a slight pulse, and immediately rushed him out for further care. He had been shot with a single bullet in the head. Dawn, in bed beside her husband, was sadly declared dead at the scene. The mother of 3 had received 2 gunshots behind her ear. Both had been asleep when the killer attacked. When the couple was found, each had a pillow resting over their heads. Walking through the kitchen, responding officers noticed drawers hanging open haphazardly, though nothing appeared disturbed within them, nor were any items found to be missing. From one of these drawers, a notepad and a pen had been retrieved and left sitting out on the kitchen counter. On the note, someone had roughly scrawled, "I've been watching you for some time. Get me?" The writer had gone over each capitalized letter a few times, as though to conceal the handwriting. Also on the counter was a gun, later to be confirmed as Antonio Sr.'s own handgun, a .22 caliber pistol, and the murder weapon. He was known to have kept the gun in the drawer of his bedside table, just as AJ had recalled when speaking with 911 dispatch. Investigators determined that the gun had been retrieved next to Antonio while he slept. The evidence indicated that Dawn had been shot first, twice, and very closely together. Then the shooter turned to Antonio, perhaps, they thought, because the initial 2 shots had caused him to awake, prompting the killer to shoot Antonio Sr. as well. The initial assessment of the scene yielded an obvious suspect. The home security system had sensors on every external door as well as motion detectors to catch movement inside. None of the door sensors had been triggered. All windows were locked with their screens still secured. It would have been impossible for the killer to go out through a window. There was no sign of forced entry. 2 family members had been shot using a gun that had already been inside the house, and that remained inside the house when law enforcement arrived, not carried away by the killer. 2 individuals walked out. 12-year-old Kara, who had just been awoken by her brother as recorded while he spoke to the 911 dispatcher. That left only 16-year-old Antonio Jr. AJ was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser. In the early morning hours, AJ was questioned by investigators from the Houston Police Department. HPD officers remarked that AJ appeared emotionless throughout this period. They did not see him shed a tear over the loss of his mother. His father was in critical care, fighting for his life. HPD felt certain that, given the circumstances, AJ must have been the shooter. They began to piece together the context and their case by asking AJ to explain his relationship with his parents. The interview audio was recorded, but not captured on video.
You get along with your mom, get along with dad, no problems, no
Me and dad were really close. And then me and my mom, me, my brother, and my sister, had our, little issues with my mom, but it was never anything, serious,
Investigators asked specifically about AJ's older brother Josh, who had arrived at the crime scene shortly after law enforcement. In the chaos of the night, AJ had also found time to call his brother Josh. He told his brother that their parents had been shot. Josh was at the house moments later because he lived just down the street.
Now, you have an older brother that doesn't live there?
No, he's not. He just moved. He was going to Berlin, and he just moved back 3 weeks ago. He's going to the Art Institute now,
Okay.
and he lives in those apartments. Our house is here, and when you come out and that left on Maple Ridge, he lives in those apartment complexes right there.
Okay, so right around the corner.
Yeah, it's right around the corner.
Okay, right around the corner. Now, how is his relationship with everybody in the family?
He's really, me, him, and my dad are a really close group. We sit down and talk a lot. And then him and my mom are identical people. Their personalities are the same, so they're close. And then me and him are just have a really close brother relationship. And then my little sister loves him.
While AJ was questioned, the crime scene was being processed. There were no usable fingerprints found in the house. Nothing was found on the gun, nor on the note and pen left out in the kitchen. There were shell casings found in the master bedroom, but also in AJ's bedroom. AJ was asked about what he knew about his father's gun.
You know what kind of gun it is?
I just know it's like a pistol. I think it's a 22, but I'm not like 100% positive. Like only time I've ever like used it was when we went to the gun range when I was like 8 years old or something like that. But like that's about it. And I know he has his case in one of his drawers. And like my dad, his drawers, the closet, and under the bed is like off limits. So like, I've never gone in there or like seen it or anything like that, except for when he brings it out. So like I don't know where he was keeping the gun at the time, but I know he keeps it in one of those 3 places.
Searching through the master bedroom, investigators noticed a bullet hole in the ceiling originating from AJ's 3rd floor bedroom. They locate the entry hole in the teenager's room, concealed only by a pile of socks. When pressed by the HPD on this point, AJ admits to having fired the gun. He showed it off to a friend weeks earlier and had fired it at that time. Police then found bullet holes in a pillow and blanket in AJ's closet.
It was like 2, maybe 3 weeks ago. Like me and one of my friends was just like playing around, and they were about to leave, and he was like, "Hey, well, not really he. It was like me. I was like, hey, like, have you ever tried that before?" And they were like, "Nah, I've never done it." And I was like, "Do you want me to show you how to?" And like, I like went and checked the 3 places, and the gun was on my dad's bed, and I like laid the pillow. I laid my pillow, and then like a blanket over it, a blanket under it, thinking like that would stop it, but I guess it did not stop it. Yeah.
Police did not buy into AJ's timeline. Investigators say materials from the ceiling were visible on the floor of the master bedroom. This indicated that the bullet could not have been fired weeks earlier. If that was the case, surely someone would have noticed.
You're explaining the way around that you shot through the floor 2 or 3 weeks ago when we've got fresh sheetrock on the ground and we've got a round still laying on the ground. I mean, your parents use that room constantly. They're going to notice. If your dad's going to notice an MR on the carpet, he's going to notice.
That's why I'm saying it doesn't make sense, because it wasn't in this past. I'm pretty sure it wasn't in the past week. If it wasn't this week, then it was last week.
The bullet hole was not the only suspicious anomaly identified inside the house. On the 2nd floor landing, police identified an area of carpet that appeared to have been recently burnt. It was not a large marking. The burn mark seemed to have been made from a single match that was stifled without catching a flame. The area around the burn mark smelt strongly of gasoline.
Was the carpet burnt?
That was Tuesday. Okay.
Did you spill anything on the floor before?
No, I didn't spill anything on the floor. That's the thing that was like confusing to me. I didn't spill anything on the floor.
What's the bottle of rubbing alcohol that's empty in your bedroom?
I don't know.
I'm just asking because the other investigator that was out there says that the floor right there smells like Excel, which is like some type of
like gas, something like that. Yeah, right. That's what me and my dad, when like it happened, we both said that it like smelled like gas somewhere, and we didn't know where it was coming from.
Investigators speculated that in the days before the murders, AJ had been attempting to set fire to the 2nd floor landing, just at the entrance of the stairs, which would block access out of the house to anyone in the rooms on that floor. They also believed that the bullet-holed pillow and blanket were evidence of a test run of the shooting. This test would gauge how noisy the gun was. Could the shots be heard from Kara's room, loud enough to wake her, for example? Antonio Sr. passed away in hospital. His son stood accused of 2 counts of capital murder and was released on a $200,000 bond. AJ's motive remained murky at best, but if the alarm system was to be trusted, the case against him appeared, at least on the surface, to be a slam dunk. But was it? There were issues with the physical evidence. If AJ had been the shooter that night, there was nothing more than this circumstantial evidence linking him to the gun. AJ did not have gunpowder residue anywhere on him, his hands, arms, or clothing. There was no blood spatter either. None of his parents' blood was on AJ's person or caught in his hair. Bloodied clothing was not found anywhere in the house. Had the 16-year-old been savvy enough to thoroughly clean himself and the scene, There were no indications left of any cleaning products in any sinks, showers, or drains. DNA was found on the notepad and on the gun. This DNA matched to the Armstrong family, but could not be isolated to a single individual. This was also the case with DNA extracted from elsewhere in the house. The teenager had lied to police about playing around with his father's gun to impress a friend. He blamed his younger sister for the mess on the stairway, but he insisted that someone had entered the house that night, and he claimed to have seen that person, a man, running away from him and wearing a mask.
That's when I came down and I kind of looked, because you know how it has the little, it goes down, like you can peek real quick and see like what's like going on from down from my stairs. And like I saw someone like coming out, so I just took off back upstairs and went straight to my closet, and that's when I called.
Well, did you physically see somebody?
No, I saw him running. Like I saw him running.
Or is it he or she? Or?
It was definitely a guy. It wasn't a girl. There wasn't like long hair or anything like that. I mean, they had it was like a mask, and like you could only see the eyes and the mouth. But he looked like a black guy. But I'm not like 100% positive. But I'm pretty sure it was an African American, and like I'd say like 6 feet maybe.
So how do you feel right now? Can you talk to us about how you're feeling?
If convicted, A.J. Armstrong faced an automatic life sentence without the chance of parole for at least 40 years. A.J.'s family stood firmly behind him while his defense attorneys prepared to defend the teenager at trial.
We will stand
We
strong.
know him.
We know our
That's
grandson.
the thing. We know our grandson.
Yes.
We know what he's capable of doing
Yes.
and what he's not capable of doing.
No.
And we know that he's not capable of murdering his mother and his father.
There was somebody else in the house that night, and to know that this is something I'm being accused of just makes everything so much worse. Dealing with not having my parents anymore, it's the fact that I'm being accused of something of this magnitude.
Before the case saw a jury, a woman named Maxine Adams, a friend of the Armstrongs, came forward offering an alternative theory of the crime. Maxine claimed that Antonio Sr. had been involved in a prostitution ring. Maxine's husband had also been involved. They had, by extension, become connected with some shady associates and had even received death threats. AJ's defense, headed by attorney Rick DeToto, claimed this information had been withheld by the state and pushed for an outright dismissal of the charges against AJ. In Maxine's interview with police, she backed up her claims. To the family, this came as a shock, but also a potential explanation for the murders that did not involve young AJ.
Full details. Names, phone numbers, people involved, how it worked.
The woman said that my son was receiving threatening phone calls. He's dead. You mean to tell me that wasn't enough for you to start investigating? It's painful, but I want to know truth and I want my grandson free.
The Armstrong's gym first-class training was broken into just after the murders. A link between this break-in and the murders was not made. The HPD found Maxine Adams' claims to be unsubstantiated. But with these rumors and curious activities playing out in the months after the killings, Rick DeToto told the media that it was clear that the state did not want the public to know what was really happening. The motion to have the case dismissed nonetheless failed. AJ was 19 years old when he went on trial in the spring of 2019.
Within 11 minutes of going into that house, before any evidence was processed, before they knew anything about the crime scene, as far as forensics, before anything, they made up their mind, he did it.
In a surprise move, the defense introduced yet another theory of the crime when they pointed the finger at a new suspect, Josh Armstrong, AJ and Kara's older half-brother. Josh is the son of Dawn and stepson to Antonio Sr. In the years following the murders, Josh had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and he began to receive treatment. He had reported paranoid episodes and violent thoughts.
For the past 3 years, he's been in and out of a psychiatric facility. You're going to hear evidence that he's suicidal. You're going to hear evidence that he's homicidal. You're going to hear evidence that he's catatonic. You're going to hear evidence that he has a woman in his head that he's trying to kill.
Jurors heard from Hannah Pylon, Josh's ex-girlfriend, who had been living with him at the time of the murders. She was asleep when the shooting had taken place. Josh was at home when she awoke, but she was unable to verify his whereabouts for the hours earlier. She assumed he had been sleeping next to her. Hannah testified that she awoke when Josh received the phone call from AJ. There was someone in his parents' house, he told her, as he headed for a shotgun, then straight out the door. She also testified that Josh spiraled after his parents' death. He heard voices in his head. He became paranoid, depressed, and obsessed with the murders. Josh then checked himself into the hospital for psychiatric treatment. Kara Armstrong, now a teenager herself, took the stand as a character witness for her brother and to discuss the family dynamic. She told the jury that Josh had been the black sheep of the family, that he perceived that his parents loved the other two children more than him, and that his demeanor had completely changed for the worse just after returning from college. Kara also gave testimony addressing the key piece of evidence against AJ, the security system. It was finicky, she said. Kara recounted how the system often misfired. The sensors did not always work. In particular, the door sensors would fail to signal when the external doors were opened. She had explained this to investigators on the night her parents were killed. The defense aimed to prove that the alarm system reports showing no doors had been opened in the home for hours prior to law enforcement arriving on the scene were complete nonsense.
Those records are not worth the paper they're written on. There was at least 77 different errors in those alarm records. Those alarm records are absolutely useless, and the whole state's theory that the house is closed and no one can get into it is nonsense.
To this point, the motive attributed to AJ for the murders remained murky. The state sought to show a growing tension between the teenager and his parents. Prosecutor John Jordan presented a series of text messages sent amongst AJ and his parents. Prosecutors showed the jury that Dawn and Antonio Sr. sent several texts to AJ, calling him a liar, expressing anger that he was smoking in the house, letting his grades slip, and disobeying their rules. To her husband, Dawn wrote, "AJ is starting to lie. I am so disappointed. He doesn't care about anything. He is a bold-faced liar like I have never seen before." AJ had been kicked out of school due to failing grades. He had broken curfew, been irresponsible with his car, and not taking responsibility. 8 weeks before the murders, AJ wrote to his parents, "I'm not even going to try to say sorry for everything because right now I know it doesn't mean anything to you guys. I know I need a major life change right now." His mother responded, "We gave you all and the best we had. We wanted the best for you. We provided the best education, bought you a great car to celebrate you. We tried to be open with you and what was important to you, and all you do is lie to us, scheme behind our backs, chose to piss on all we tried to do. Beyond disappointed. I will never understand why you are a liar and do not work hard in school. You don't want to be right or do good. I am so heartbroken, but it is what it is." Although some exchanges showed a growing tension between the Armstrongs and their teenage son, others showed the opposite. On occasion, Dawn and Antonio offered praise to AJ for his efforts. His attorneys argued that his messaging history is not one of a homicidal son, just a regular teenager, flirting with his girlfriend, misbehaving, and having disagreements with his parents.
90 minutes before this happened, he's in bed flirting with his girlfriend, talking about how I love you, how I want to get married. I mean, that's totally inconsistent with someone who's angry, suicidal, homicidal.
The jury heard over 39 hours of testimony. At times, the proceedings were emotional. AJ's former football coach, who was a close friend of Antonio Sr., broke down on the stand while speaking of his affection towards both father and son. AJ himself collapsed with his head in his hands while the court was shown autopsy photos of his parents. AJ did not take the stand in his own defense. Jurors deliberated for over 19 hours over the fate of Antonio Armstrong Jr. Over 3 days while they deliberated, the jury passed multiple notes to the judge, stating that they were hopelessly deadlocked.
It is improbable the jury can reach a verdict, and accordingly, because of that, the court declares a mistrial.
The state did not drop their case against A.J. Armstrong after the mistrial. They issued a statement almost immediately of their intention to retry the case.
Did you kill your parents?
No. Never. Never. Being in this situation and just that being a constant reminder that someone would even think that it's something that I would do. It's just, it hurts. It's frustrating.
The second trial was delayed due to the pandemic and would not commence until 2022. By that time, AJ was 23 years old and had become a father himself. His son, Hendrix, was also given the second name Antonio after both his father and the grandfather that he would never know. His girlfriend, Kate, had stood by him since 2016 and would again take the stand to testify in his defense. There were changes this time around. The security video of the burglars breaking into the Armstrongs' gym after the murders was excluded from evidence. However, AJ's defense had gained support of their theory that it was the other son, Josh Armstrong, that was the shooter. Medical records from the elder son had been obtained and presented to the jury. The records showed that Josh had claimed to have witnessed his parents' murders. His own words placed him in the room that night. To the defense, this was tantamount to a confession. But the prosecution interpreted these statements as nothing more than a symptom of his mental illness.
There were no signs to anyone of mental illness before these murders.
In their interpretation, the murders had served as the trigger for Josh's schizophrenia. He had not been severely mentally ill prior to July 2016. And there was no way these murders were the act of an individual under psychosis. Much of the focus in both trials was placed on the timeline, as pieced together by phone records and the hotly disputed security system reports. The alarm had been set at 9:52 p.m. by Kara. That was an undisputed fact. AJ was active on his cell phone, primarily texting with Kate, until 1:02 a.m., at which point it was placed on a charger, likely in his third-floor bedroom. The phone was lifted from its charger at 1:08 a.m., but not unlocked for use. 1 minute later, the motion detector on the second floor was activated. The phone screen was turned on and off over the next several minutes, giving off ambient light, perhaps to navigate the dark house, argued the prosecution. Dawn and Antonio were shot with Antonio's gun between this time and the 911 call placed at 1:40 a.m. The only period of time all day that AJ was not active on his cell phone. During that period at 1:25 a.m., the living room motion sensor was activated. It is assumed that this is when the note and gun were left in the kitchen. Between this time and the 911 call, the prosecution speculated AJ was cleaning up the scene and himself. The front door sensor was activated at 1:57 a.m. when AJ disarmed the system to allow law enforcement to enter. Then, as though to prove the accuracy of the sensors, 2 minutes later, the system report also showed the kitchen door opening, exactly in line with when responding officers performed a check of the property. The security system expert called by the prosecution, a man named Tim Rader from the home security company ADT, faced an intense cross-examination by Rick DeToto. The defense team had found what they deemed to be 77 distinct errors in the security report for the house in the month of July 2016 alone. In the period from June to July of the same year, they identified over 120 failures in the system detecting movements, the majority of which they said related to the opening and closing of external doors.
We know what this is. This is a garbage can. The alarm records are that. Garbage. They are garbage.
They further pointed to statements from Kara and others that the garage door would not always completely close. The security panel by this door could nonetheless be armed by using a key fob.
It's about reasonable doubt. Now I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Let's assume that Tim Rader is a doctor. And someone goes to Dr. Rader, the ADT guy, and says, "Doctor, I have this pain in my back." The doctor does tests. He has you meet with other people. And the day comes and Dr. Rader calls you and says, "Come on in. I need to talk to you. You have a cancer mass on your spine. If you don't have surgery, you're going to die. If you do have surgery, you could be paralyzed for the rest of your life." I think we'd all agree that that's a serious decision, much like deciding life in prison. And you say, "Doctor, thank you. I'm devastated by this. I'm going to get a second opinion." And you get all of Dr. Rader's tests and everything he did, and you take it to another doctor. The doctor says, "Let me get back to you. I'm going to review these." The doctor calls you back and says, "Sir or ma'am, I've looked through all these records, and there's at least 77 errors in those records. I've also found out that Dr. Rader State failed to talk to anybody that you talked to about food poisoning. There's some notes in here that say you could have food poisoning. We need to look at it. They should ask the patient what he had to eat, what he or she had to drink." But Dr. Rader ignored that. And the second doctor says, "Look, I just think you had a case of food poisoning. And let me show you all the errors in his records." How many people in here would have that surgery? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Prosecutors, court staff, how many people in here would have that surgery? Why? Sergeant Dagnall didn't even raise his hand. He's sitting right there. Why would you not have that surgery? Because you have a reasonable doubt.
Prosecutor John Jordan argued that AJ had slipped up. At one point on the 911 call, in a barely audible segment played for the jury, AJ complains of a ringing in his ears.
And there's this amazing thing is if you fire a gun without ear protection, something happens to your ears. That wouldn't happen if you're in another room. The whole reason why we have ear protection is there's like a high pitch or a ringing that goes on in your ears. When the dispatcher asked him, "Do you hear any noises?" what does AJ Armstrong say?
Okay, can you hear anything else that's going on?
It's not even like he's talking to her. He's whispering it slowly to himself. He's saying, "It's high-pitched in my ears." This one statement is a confession. There's only one reason why you would have a high pitch in your ears is because you just fired a firearm inside of a home.
The state also emphasized what they argued was a foolish and unbelievable story told by AJ. 5 full hours had passed before he told the HPD that he had seen a masked man in the house. On the 16-minute call to 911, he told the operator only that the door to his parents' room was opened a crack. He was telling a story, like one from a movie. All signs seemed to point to AJ as the killer, but just like a movie plot, there was an unlikely twist. It was the one-armed man that did it, argued the prosecution.
So now it's not a crack. Now he's going down the stairs and he sees someone coming, but it's more.
Wait, did you physically see somebody?
No, I saw him running. I saw him running.
Now he sees someone running. You would think during a 16-minute 911 call, if he really saw someone running, he would have said, "Ma'am, I saw someone running in my house. Please get here. My sister's down the hallway," wouldn't he? Wouldn't he have said, someone's here, please? My sister is down the hallway. I see him running that way. But he doesn't do that. But to homicide investigators, if you're the only one in the house, if you're the one that committed murder, you've got to invent somebody. We all know from movies, the one-armed man, that's what this is like.
In the first mistrial in 2019, the jury had deadlocked 8-4. 8 jurors voting to convict, and 4 believed AJ was not guilty. In November 2022, the jury deadlocked again. This time, the numbers were in the reverse, favoring the defense.
It's time to free AJ. It's been 6 years, it's been 2 trials, it's been 40, 50 witnesses, it's been probably millions of dollars of expenses by the district attorney's office. It's time to let this young man go. We're absolutely ready.
You're prepared to do this again?
Yes, ma'am. I told you we'll never stop fighting for AJ.
Speaking to the media afterwards while maintaining their anonymity, a handful of jurors spoke about how difficult the deliberation had been inside the jury room.
When he said that he saw someone running down the stairs, it was clearly made up. It was dark. He said he was African American wearing a mask. Well, it was dark. And if it truly was your brother, Josh, wouldn't you recognize his physique?
Again, I did hear everyone saying, we believe he did it, but we have doubt.
The state has made clear their intention to try AJ Armstrong for a 3rd time. Jury selection is scheduled for the 24th of February, 2023, with opening statements and testimony expected to commence in later March. The judge in the trial filed an order to change venue, in part due to the scrutiny the case has received in Harris County and how this may impact the delivery of a fair, unbiased jury trial. It's unclear how these pretrial proceedings may impact the timeline. But according to the state of Texas, since July 2016, one fact has seemed certain. Antonio Armstrong Jr. is guilty of murdering his parents. 8 years later, they still need to prove it. That was the story of Antonio Armstrong Jr. and the murder of his parents Dawn and Antonio Sr. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin, this is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.